What if I told you that scientists found evidence of a snake so massive that when they first measured it, they thought their calculations were broken, not exaggerated, not a myth, a real animal that actually existed? And here's the wildest part. It shouldn't have been possible, but it was. And the reason why will completely change how you think about the world we live in today. Picture this. You're standing in a Colombian rainforest right now. The air is thick and humid, with bugs everywhere. Now imagine that same spot 60 million years ago, but crank the temperature up by at least 15 degrees. Make the river slower, murkier, almost like swamp water. The trees are different. The sky is different, and lurking in that water is something that would make every modern predator look like a house pet. Titanoboa, the largest snake that ever lived, and I'm not talking a little bit larger. I'm talking twice the size of the biggest anaconda ever found. We are talking 42 to 50 feet long, and up to 2,500 pounds. To put that in perspective, if you laid one across a school bus, it would hang off both ends. If it wrapped around a car, it could literally crush the frame. But here's what blows my mind. This thing wasn't found in some ancient text or a blurry fossil from the 1800s. It was discovered in 2009, in a coal mine, by a team who thought they were digging up crocodile bones. Let me take you to that moment. Deep in the Cerrejón coal mine in northern Colombia, paleontologists are doing what they always do, carefully extracting fossils from compressed rock layers. They are expecting the usual stuff: ancient plants, maybe some turtle shells. Indefinitely crocodile remains because crocodiles dominated those swaps back then. Then someone pulls out a vertebrae, and it's huge, thicker than your wrist, heavy, massive curvature. First reaction? Yup, another giant croc, because that made sense. Crocodiles were the apex predators of the Paleocene, epoch. But then they start examining it closer, and something's off. The shape isn't right. The structure doesn't match. They pull out another one. Same thing. Then another, and another. Dozens of them, all the same weird shape, all enormous. And then it hits them. These aren't crocodile vertebrae. They are snake vertebrae. Imagine being in that room when somebody says that out loud for the first time. Guys, I think this is a snake. Dead silence, because if this is a snake, then everything we thought we knew about the limits of reptile size just got shattered. They started running the numbers, and this is where it gets insane. Scientists don't just guess the size of extinct animals. They use something called scaling laws. Basically, modern snakes have a super predictable relationship between the size of their vertebrae and their total body length. You measure the vertebrae, compare it to living anacondas and boas, and you can calculate backwards with scary accuracy. So they measured Titanoboa's vertebrae, ran the math, got a number, ran it again because there's no way, got the same number, ran it a third time, same result. This snake was over 42 feet long at minimum. Some estimates push past 50 feet. It weighed more than a grand piano, and when the research paper dropped, the scientific community absolutely lost it. But here's the question nobody was asking yet. Why was it so big? Because this wasn't just some random evolutionary quirk. Titanoboa's size was a direct message from the past, a biological receipt that told us exactly what Earth's climate was like 60 million years ago. And that's where this story gets really wild. Snakes are cold-blooded. They can't regulate their own body temperature like we can. They rely entirely on their environment to stay warm, and that means their size is directly limited by temperature. The warmer it is, the faster their metabolism runs. Faster metabolism means faster growth, better digestion, and the ability to sustain a much larger body. So when scientists found Titanoboa, they weren't just finding a giant snake, they were basically finding a thermometer, a living, breathing climate record frozen in stone. And what that thermometer told them was terrifying. For Titanoboa to exist, to grow that large and to function as an apex predator, the average temperature in that region had to be at least 32 degrees Celsius year-round. That's about 90 degrees Fahrenheit. No winter, no cool nights, just relentless sweltering sauna-like heat 24/7 for millions of years. Let that sink in for a second. Modern anacondas, the largest snakes alive today, are already pushing the biological limits of what our current climate allows. They max out at about 28 feet and 500 pounds. To get to Titanoboa size, you need a planet that's several degrees hotter, consistently, globally, for millions of years. This was a world with no ice caps, no polar regions. The tropics stretched almost to the poles. Rainforests were denser, wetter, and hotter, and in those conditions, life went absolutely berserk. The Cerrejón fossil site gives us an unbelievable snapshot of this world. We're talking giant turtles with shells the size of coffee tables, early crocodiles with blunt crushing teeth built for cracking turtle shells, massive fish, dense vegetation. Everything was supersized because the planet was running hot, and Titanoboa was the king of it all. But here's what I find the most fascinating. How did something this big actually hunt? Because you'd think a 50-foot snake would be this terrifying land monster chasing down prey. But actually, that's not how it worked at all. Titanoboa was too heavy to hunt on land effectively. 2,500 pounds of muscle doesn't just glide gracefully through a jungle. It drags and struggles. Gravity becomes your worst enemy. But in water, everything changes. Titanoboa lived in slow-moving swamps and rivers, murky water with low visibility, thick vegetation. And in that environment, it became a ghost. It would sit almost completely submerged, just eyes and nostrils above the waterline, completely motionless for hours, maybe days at a time. And then something would move too close. A turtle wading into shallow water, or a crocodile moving through the reeds, a fish in a narrow channel, and Titanoboa would strike. The constriction force of this thing was unreal. Modern boas and pythons kill by restricting blood flow. They squeeze until the heart stops. But Titanoboa didn't need to be that precise. Biomechanical models estimate it could exert over 400 psi of pressure. That's enough to instantly crush ribs, collapse lungs, and shatter bones. Whatever it grabbed wasn't escaping, period. And after the kill, it would just sit there, digesting, for weeks, maybe months. Because when you're that big and cold-blooded, you don't need to eat often. One massive meal could sustain you for a long time. Water wasn't just its hunting ground. It was its life support system. The buoyancy kept its internal organs from being crushed by its own weight. The water helped regulate its temperature when things got too hot. And the murkiness gave it the element of surprise. So if Titanoboa was this perfectly adapted apex predator in a world basically designed for it, why isn't it still around? Because the world changed and Titanoboa couldn't. After the Paleocene, Earth started cooling. Not dramatically at first, just a few degrees over 1,000,000 years. But for a cold-blooded giant, that was a death sentence. When it's colder, your metabolism slows, digestion takes longer, movement becomes harder, growth rates tank. And for something as massive as Titanoboa, this was catastrophic. It needed huge amounts of food just to maintain its body, but with a slower metabolism, it couldn't hunt as well, couldn't digest as fast, and couldn't compete with other predators. And it wasn't just temperature. Mammals were rising. They were warm-blooded, which meant they could stay active even when it got cold. They were diversifying, getting bigger and competing for resources. The swampy rainforests were drying out. Rivers became seasonal. The entire ecosystem that supported Titanoboa was collapsing. The giant turtles, gone. The massive crocodiles, dying out. The food web that kept Titanoboa alive was disintegrating. And here's the haunting part. Titanoboa didn't die from disease. It didn't get hunted to extinction. It didn't lose some evolutionary arms race. It died because the planet cooled by just a few degrees. That's it. A tiny shift in global climate, and the largest snake that ever lived simply stopped existing. And that should terrify us. Because climate doesn't just shape ecosystems. It defines the upper and lower limits of what life is even possible. Titanoboa was a creature that existed because every condition aligned perfectly. The temperature, the environment, the prey, and the geography. Everything had to be exactly right. And then it wasn't, and Titanoboa vanished. For 10 million years it ruled. The uncontested king of an alien world. And then, in the blink of geological time, it was gone. Leaving behind only bones buried in Colombian coal mines. A reminder that even the most dominant creatures on Earth are just passengers on a planet that's always changing. And maybe, just maybe we should pay attention to that.